really wanted to do something back in the real world and something that had sort of meaning in the real world to me. The sort of experience of that, I think, percolated away in my brain for another sort of 5-10 years before it all popped out in the form of oil painting. I think putting that out there is an incredibly exposing experience, because all of a sudden there's nothing to hide behind. This is me as an artist, and I'm showing you my innermost sort of feelings through paint. Hopefully I might be able to dispel a few myths that in order to be an artist you have to be doing it full time.
Hi, I'm Claire, founder of Creativity Found, a community for creative learners and educators, connecting adults who want to find a creative outlet with the artists and crafters who can help them do so with workshops, courses, online events and kits. For this podcast, I chat with people who have found or refound their creativity as adults. We explore their childhood experiences of the arts, discuss how they came to the artistic practices they now love, and consider the barriers they may have experienced between the two. We'll also explore what it is that people value and gain from their newfound artistic pursuits, and how their creative lives enrich their practical, necessary, everyday lives. For this episode, I'm speaking with civil servant and portrait artist Sally Ward about policy advising, oil painting, and why you shouldn't enter two art competitions at the same time. Hi Sally, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Claire.
Brilliant. Can you start by telling me what the creative activity you have returned to is?
I have returned to painting, so I am an artist now, but it's not what I've always done, so I've done different things in my career.
Fabulous. Right, let's go right back to the beginning then. I know that you were ahead of the game in your art education at secondary school. Can you tell me how you came to complete your GCSE and A-level art studies early, and where you think your artistic talents and enthusiasm came from?
Yeah, gosh, that is a big question, sort of going back. In terms of my sort of taking exams early, I was very lucky that when I went to secondary school, they were very forward thinking, and I was very prolific in terms of my art by that point. So when I was around sort of 11, 12, and I painted and drew all the time, and the teachers there, they spotted a talent, and I was very keen and driven, really. I'm not sure whether it would happen these days, but I was very lucky that the teachers there felt that I could do my GCSE when I was 12, and I was up for that. Really sort of liked the idea of that challenge. So that's what I did, and that all went very well. And then I went on to sort of take my other art exams early. And when I started doing my A-level, which was around the age of 14, the school amazingly decided to send me off to the local sixth form college every Thursday during the following 2 years to life draw, essentially, which is amazing. So I joined all the sixth formers when I was 14, and it was a formative experience. It's something that I know very few people or children of that age would ever get the opportunity to do, and it was an amazing opportunity. And I was lucky to have some excellent teachers through those couple of years who were artists themselves, and I think that was incredibly inspiring to suddenly be taught by people who were practicing artists themselves and were sort of steeped in that world. That was an amazing experience. And then I think sort of going back to, where it all came from. I mean, my parents, neither of them are artists. My dad had, in later life, also became a designer, so there is a sort of artistic gene in there somewhere. My mum is very good at art, but didn't pursue it. She's an art sort of appreciator and enthusiast, and probably one of my earliest memories about sort of looking at other people's art. I remember we had a sort of a calendar at home, and it's probably when I was about 8 or 9, and it was one of Picasso's famous blue nudes. And I remember my mum sort of saying, "That is just beautiful. I just love that." And we would look at it, and I agreed. I just thought it was the most beautiful thing. And so I think there was constantly an appreciation of art with my mum. And then when I was a bit older, we started going to art exhibitions together. And, I remember some really sort of going to some really iconic exhibitions when I look back at it now. So, there's a massive Lucian Freud exhibition in the early 90s. That blew my mind. I was very young at the time, but very interested in the sort of nudes and the figure and portraiture, probably at that sort of early point. And other exhibitions like Munch's The Frieze of Life, which was another really iconic show back in, I think it was the 90s. So I think all in all, I had very supportive parents who appreciated art and gave me opportunities, in an amazing school who were able to stretch me in a way that I wanted to be stretched at that point in my life.
It's very fortuitous. Do you think you were quite a mature young lady? How was it to be 14 and in a sixth form college? To me, that's quite a big difference, not in actual years, but in growing up years. How did you find that social aspect of it?
Yeah, it was a good experience. It was a very strange thing. It felt incredibly comfortable. I was just very into the art. The people there, welcomed me. I remember them being quite protective of me, actually, some of the sort of 18-year-olds. So I felt very comfortable in that environment. The art teachers there were just great. So I sort of slipped into that world very easily, and it felt very, very comfortable. And looking back, maybe it wasn't the most normal childhood thing to be looking at Picasso's nudes when I was 8, but I think because that was the sort of context, it felt completely normal and right to be in a life drawing class at that age.
Yeah. Presumably, after that, though, you still had to you had to stay in school and do your other A levels and what have you. So, did you get to continue art? Were you planning on going through the usual path of foundation studies and what have you?
Yeah, I did think about it. I mean, so I think by the time I'd got to 16, where I had my A level art under my belt, and at that point, I started my other A levels, in the normal time frame, and I studied English and psychology and music. And I found those 3 subjects, pretty full on, to be honest. And I think after a while, it became clear that I needed a bit more time to focus on them. Really, it was at that point that, maybe a bit sadly, that art started to take a bit of a back seat. And I just got incredibly interested in the sort of more academic subjects and that side of things. That became my focus. And I think, by the time I was thinking about universities and what to do next, I did think about art college, but I think I'd almost sort of passed the point where I suddenly, there were these lots of other exciting, interesting subjects to look at, and I just became very involved with all of that. And so in the end, I applied to study music instead.
You must have been very good at that because you were accepted to Cambridge University to study music. Was that hard work? I would imagine being in that establishment is a lot of hard work.
Yeah, it was hard work. It was certainly hard work to get there, to get that offer. without sort of banging on about it too much, I went to a great school and a great sixth form, both state schools, and there weren't many people from my sort of cohort who ended up going to Oxford or Cambridge. So it certainly wasn't anything that either my parents had thought of or I had thought of until I got to the point where I was thinking about where to apply. And so I kind of did it rather unknowingly, really. I really liked the course. I liked the sort of academic nature of the course. I went to visit and I thought it was obviously a lovely place, and something really sparked in me, and I worked incredibly hard. When I got there, when I finally started at Cambridge, it was quite a shock because suddenly I was with lots of people who had been steeped in the music education world for many, many years, people who'd gone to sort of specialist music colleges or music schools. I think I felt suddenly that, I might have thought that I was quite good at music, but actually after that I started to reassess. But that is a good thing. So it gave me a bit of a sort of shock, but it was a wonderful, wonderful experience, and I survived and came through it.
Well done, you. Did you know what you wanted to do next? What that was going to lead to in the big wide world?
No, I didn't. No, I'm afraid I wasn't somebody who had a clear plan at any point about what I wanted to do. I think because I was interested in lots of things, that has probably always been quite a challenge to know what to focus on. I think, at first I was quite tempted to go down an academic route. My degree at Cambridge was 3 years studying music, and then I decided to stay on and do an MPhil at Cambridge as well in musicology, where I specialised in Sibelius, sort of Nordic tone poems, which is another world, another life. But I think by the end of that, I had almost exhausted myself with that sort of intense study. And the thing that I felt very strongly at that point was that I really wanted to do something back in the real world, and something that had sort of meaning in the real world to me. And so, in a strange sort of twist again, I applied to the civil service, and so I became a policy advisor working for a central government department, and I still work there today.
How does one become a policy advisor? What is a policy advisor?
Okay, well, it's a really fascinating job. It is. No, it's great. Well, I mean, essentially, my job was very much advising, providing advice for ministers on all sorts of current issues. I worked across a whole breadth of economic issues, public spending issues, which has been incredibly fascinating. It's something that I feel incredibly privileged to have done, because I've seen, lots of administrations come and go, and it is a very interesting role. When I sort of reduced my hours to sort of accommodate children and then later art, I now work in much more of a sort of training capacity and sort of professionalism capacity, which is also very enjoyable.
Yeah. I'm assuming that kind of role takes up a lot of your brain space as well as time and energy, and you've mentioned family briefly there as well. So at this point then, maybe paintbrushes and musical instruments don't get a look in.
No, definitely not. It was very all-consuming, my job. I was working full-time, sometimes on high-profile issues that naturally are incredibly fast-paced. So no, art didn't feature really at all. There were a few little times that it did come back. I went on a 2-week course at the Slade School of Art in my late 20s. So that's probably 10 years after I'd really stopped and wound down doing art in any sort of regular capacity. And it was a life painting course again, and it was a wonderful experience. It was absolutely fantastic being back with other creative people, other artists. Was a really energizing experience, and a very short experience, but actually the sort of experience of that, I think, percolated away in my brain for another sort of 5-10 years before it all popped out in the form of oil painting. There wasn't time really for much, but the odd chink of art here and there, just to sort of keep that thread going.
Yeah, but now it's a very big part of your life. So how has that change come about?
Yeah, and I mean that's right. It's a huge part. It's the main part, I would say now, certainly of my working life. How did it come about? Well, this is this is probably a long and drawn out tale. Well, when I had children, even though obviously I was extremely busy looking after a baby at home, I was at home for a year of maternity leave, and I think it was just having a bit more time at home, and I started to just dabble a bit more. And I think, you know, the memory of the course I'd done was sort of still running around in my head, and I thought, oh, you know, I do miss doing that. So I did start to dabble, and I did a few little paintings, and I put some of them on Facebook just for my friends to have a look, and they were all very nice, as, you know, friends would be. And my husband, who is, you know, my biggest supporter, I have to say, he was encouraging me, come on, you've got to do more of this because, you know, you're really talented. And I was like, oh yeah, but I haven't got any time, etc. All of that. But I think, you know, getting a bit of feedback from people on my artwork on social media really sort of boosted me. So I sort of started doing it a little bit more often. And as I said, I think I sort of signed up to some life drawing classes, and that was, again, wonderful experience. Felt totally at home, realised I'd really missed drawing and painting. And then I happened to do a little portrait of my son and put that on Facebook, and one of my friends got in touch and said, oh, you know, I love that. I'd love you to do a commission of my daughter. And that was the first commission that I got, and that was all very exciting. You know, somebody paying me to do something that I absolutely love doing.
Yeah.
And that was, I guess, the beginning of it. And really, since that point, which was about 9 years ago, and it was a watercolour, since that point, I've never been without a commission on the go. So it sort of snowballed. And by this point, I had gone back to work, but I was working 3 days a week. But obviously my second son came along, and I think I just had one day where he was in nursery and I wasn't at work. And so it was the one day that I could focus on painting. So that's what I did. And then when the youngest child went to school, suddenly it freed up the school day. And at that point, I'd been doing commissions for a number of years. But something in me thought I could just keep going and doing these watercolour portraits endlessly. But I really want to sort of push myself at this point, and I really want to get back to how I felt as a teenager, when I was really exploring who I was as an artist. And I wanted to develop my own work and see where that would take me. So I was very, very fortunate because my employer was happy to sort of let me reduce my working day to 2 days. And, you know, family-wise, my husband, you know, is obviously a pay cut doing that. So taking a bit of a risk, I was very lucky to be able to do that. Fully appreciate that not everyone is in that position. And so suddenly I had 3 days a week where I could paint in the school hours. And that is where sort of things started to change for me. And I thought, right, I love watercolours, but it's not where I feel artistically, that's not where I feel quite at home. And so I got my oil paints out, and I hadn't painted with oils since I was a student, but it felt right, like a sense of, cliche to say it, felt like coming home. And I was interested in portraits, and the first portraits I did actually were both selected for prestigious competitions. At that point, I think everything started to just come together, which was lovely, because these paintings were very different from the ones I'd been dabbling with, and they were an expression of me as an artist. And so to have those paintings recognised was a really amazing moment.
Almost you've had two rebirths there, and 2 points at which to be brave in order to show your work. I talk a lot with my guests about that point of showing the work, and as you've already said, with the oil paints, you're starting to do stuff that is more personal, and therefore possibly you need even more courage to show it, but you did show it. How did that feel? Because I'm assuming that work was more personal to you, so perhaps had more meaning. Is that how you felt?
Definitely. I remember feeling very nervous. I think particularly sometimes when you're in a slightly sort of commercial situation where you've got commissions that are popular or selling, and completely understandable to then think, well, I'm going to keep doing that same thing because that is what people want, what the people commissioning me want. And so there was a sort of commercial nervousness about it. Not that I was in any way making a lot of money, they were all quite small scale. But there was a nervousness that, the people who really liked my previous work, what were they going to think about? Oh, suddenly this is transformed in style. But it was just a very strong instinctive pull to be myself as an artist, and to paint as I wanted to paint. That was an incredibly strong feeling. I had only recently joined Instagram, and I think I had posted a few of my watercolour portraits, which, don't get me wrong, I absolutely loved doing them. I'm still proud of them, but I remember holding off a long time posting my new work because it was so different, and I thought it would confuse people. Obviously, the commissions I'd been doing had been of other people, dictated by what they wanted. And I think the very, very strong element in my work is that my work is, as I'm sure it is with most artists, that it is a very personal, emotionally intimate thing. Painting portraits, particularly self-portraiture, but also I focused, in those early paintings on portraits of my close family, self-portraits, and they're incredibly personal, and they chart. I'm actually getting quite emotional talking about it, but they have a lot of meaning for me, and I think putting that out there is an incredibly exposing experience, because all of a sudden there's nothing to hide behind. This is me as an artist, and I'm showing you my innermost sort of feelings through paint. And it's a very strange but exciting and scary experience.
Thank you.
Sorry.
No, that's lovely, and to hear that not only in your words but in your voice, you can that definitely comes across. Creativityfound.co.uk is the place to go to find workshops, courses, supplies, kits and books to help you get creative. So if you're looking for your own Creativity Found experience, go have a browse to see what's on offer so far. And if you can help adults to find their new creative passion, please get in touch on social media or through the contact details on the website. So let's move on to how you entered 2 competitions at the same time.
Yes, demonstrating my complete lack of nous in this new world of sort of entering portrait competitions. So the very first oil portrait that I did as me, as an artist, I entered it into 2 competitions, thoroughly expecting to get 2 no's. I really had no expectation whatsoever. So I entered it into the Sky Portrait Artist of the Year competition, where you have to submit a self-portrait. And I also submitted it to the Royal Society of Portrait Painters, which is a really prestigious competition. Looking back, I think, cool, I sort of aimed high to begin with. I didn't start with something slightly easier, and then to my shock, I was accepted into both those competitions on the basis of that first oil portrait, which I honestly couldn't believe. That was in 2019, I think. And as I was saying, I was totally new to all this sort of competition stuff and made the first cardinal sin or big mistake, which is that I couldn't be in both competitions at the same time because the painting needed to be available. So unfortunately, it was a bittersweet situation. I had to decline the place on Sky Portrait Artist of the Year in 2019 because my painting was already wrapped up in the Mall Galleries in London, ready to be exhibited with the Royal Society of Portrait Painters. And so I learned from that. New artists take note. Yeah, bittersweet, but the upshot was that it led to my portrait being exhibited at the Mall Galleries alongside some of the best portrait artists in the country and, beyond. It's an international competition. And, there are thousands of entries, and so to get a place on that wall just blew my mind. It was an incredible surprise and shock. It was a massive turning point for me where I just, having worked in isolation, both through all those years of doing those commissions, but also in that early time of developing my own approach to portraiture, to have that sort of first external recognition and validation was amazing.
And it's a big one as well. It's a big
validation. I don't think I realised properly, probably, until probably years later, how big that was for me at the time. It's an incredible thing to get that kind of recognition.
Yeah, I can imagine. I can only imagine. Sally had to decline her well-earned place in Sky's Portrait Artist of the Year competition in 2019. But in 2020 she entered again, and to her utter surprise made it all the way to the final. I talk with Sally about her time on the show in the next episode of the podcast. So for now, let's get back to our chat. What does life look like now? You've said you do still work in the day job, so to speak, and you have the family, and you've made a name for yourself in the art that you want to do. How is that balanced in your life now?
Well, it's incredibly busy. I think that's how I'd sum it up. I mean, I do work pretty much all the time, and obviously spend time with the children as well. So life is very full, but it's very good. As I said, I work 2 days a week as a civil servant, which I really enjoy the difference that brings and the mental sort of challenges there. Having a set of colleagues is nice. And then I have a sort of more solitary life at the other end of the week, which is just full to the brim, really. The challenge is actually to paint. I know that sounds odd, but that's the constant challenge, is to make sure that I am actually, not swept up with lots of other related activities, but that I am painting. So when I get focused and working on a project or a commission, that's fantastic, and I love doing that. I do lots of other things. So I've been writing this year for a national arts magazine called The Artist, which has been really enjoyable and perhaps has brought together, I used to like writing very much when I was going down the sort of academic route, and it's brought that together with thinking about my art process and how I paint. So that's been incredibly enjoyable. So yeah, life is incredibly busy, and it does make it vulnerable to any sort of external shocks, that are part of life. And it can get quite stressful at times when that happens, because the balance is very finely balanced, and I don't have much wriggle room. Doing these two very different things is incredibly fulfilling, actually. And hopefully I might be able to dispel a few myths that in order to be an artist, you have to be doing it full time. I think lots of artists do have to work in order to pay the bills, and that doesn't diminish who you are as an artist, and it doesn't mean that you're less committed. Both those jobs or careers to me are important. So hopefully I can keep that balance going.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think that's a very helpful thing for you to have said and for other people to hear. Other people who are balancing their creative passion with getting on with life and everything else that has to support it. It's very rare that, even if you're starting a business around your creative passion, you're spending a lot of time not doing the creative thing, which is something that we talk about a lot with my guests. There's always an imbalance. I don't think anybody ever gets the perfect balance.
No.
But that is good for listeners to hear as well, that nobody gets the perfect balance. So
No.
thank you very much for sharing that.
Yeah, no, definitely. I definitely don't want anyone to think that I have the perfect balance, because it comes and goes, and there are ups and downs with it, and sometimes it doesn't work very well. It's a bit sort of rough with the smooth, really, as in.
Do you ever have frustrations in the actual process of painting? For example, doing a commission, and you therefore are working to a brief. Are there ever times where you're like, this just isn't working? Are there times you get frustrated with the actual painting?
Oh yeah, no. Painting is a thoroughly torturous activity for me. Oh yes, no, I get completely frustrated, endlessly. But I think that that's probably what spurs me on. I wouldn't want anyone to think that sort of, I sit down to paint and it all sort of flows out of my paintbrush and I happily put it on the wall and that's it. No, not at all. I struggle with every single painting I do, some more than others. I do remember that when I did the second self-portrait for the Sky programme, that was a hideous experience. It nearly ended up in the bin many times. You get so involved in this process. You have some sort of elusive vision in your mind about what you're aiming for. And, the frustration of never being able to quite get to that point is, I guess, what then makes you paint the next painting. So you never reach that point of, well, I don't. I mean, I don't know whether other people do. There's always something that niggles or that thwarts me.
And how do you know when you've finished? How do you know when to stop?
Yeah, lots of people ask me this. I think I do know when to stop. There is something about, painting to me is like a series of problems that need to be resolved. Whether that's in terms of the tones, the colours, the balance of light. And I will think about a painting as much as I paint it. And so I can become, as my husband will testify, really quite moody and unpleasant when a painting is going wrong. And my brain will work on it. I'll sleep on it. I'll leave it for weeks so that my subconscious will hopefully work out what needs to be resolved in the painting to get it to where I want it to be. And I often find that I sort of will have an idea in my mind that this process is going to take me another 6 months to do. And then I'll sit down, having had that space from a painting, and I will have a sort of conscious idea of the things that I might want to change and do. But I do think there is a strange subconscious thing that comes into play where you sit down and you do something to the painting and suddenly it has resolved itself to a conclusion. And that's how it often happens. And so I don't really know that it's coming that point of resolution. But I have to have reached that point to then say, right, I'm leaving this alone now.
And then it's there.
And then it's there. But it's not that means that it will be rendered to a polished finish or anything like that. It's not usually about that. It's often about the expression and whether the painting has captured that emotion or that feeling that was within me. And it's very, very hard to describe that process. And I don't really understand it myself.
No, I understand what you mean. And I found it absolutely fascinating. And I could keep grilling you with questions about your process, but I'm not going to. But I'm going to say thank you. And I'm going to ask how people can connect with you.
Well, so the best way to connect with me is through Instagram, where my Instagram handle is @SallyWardArt. And I also have a website of the same sort of name, which is www.sallyward-art.com. And that's got all my details on and all my paintings as well. And it'd be great for people to have a look.
Brilliant. Thanks again. Thanks so much, Sally.
Thank you very much, Claire. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening to Creativity Found. If your podcast app has the facility, please leave a rating and review to help other people find us. On Instagram and Facebook, follow @CreativityFoundPodcast, and on Pinterest, look for @CreativityFound. And finally, don't forget to check out creativityfound.co.uk, the website connecting adults who want to find a creative outlet with the artists and crafters who can help them tap into their creativity.